Good morning to you. It's Daybreak at I-Fiber1. Jeff Slakey and Vicki Steele. Morning, Vicki.
Good morning, Jeff.
We've got a great guest in studio right now, Mason County Commissioner Randy Neatherlin. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Talk with you about some news that you have been making this week, a proposal for additional school resource officers and additional protection for the youth in the schools in our county. Came, I'm assuming, on the heels of all the conversations nationwide after the Parkland, Florida shooting. And so you're looking to get officers in all of the schools or all of the high schools, or talk to me about your proposal here.
Well, as you said, it came about because of the shootings, but there's more. Up in my community, up in North Mason, there has been several other events that have been just scary events. Children making claims they want to, or other things that set things in motion again that made me think eventually I have to do something, or somebody has to do something. Mm-hmm. I watched a news program where I watched that one father of the one killed little girl that was arguing that we have to stop looking at as just gun control or political, Republican, Democrat. And when he was done, I actually felt guilty for myself and for everybody, because the question comes up, what are you actually doing to have an effect on this? And I don't know if you know this, but I have 3 kids in the school.
Yeah.
But I also have coached so many of those kids that are in that school. So I have a vested interest, and I admit that straight out. But the whole idea was eventually somebody's going to have to step forward and try to put something together.
Sure.
And as I sat there for that weekend, I kept trying to think of what can be done. There's an old expression, if everybody's responsible, nobody's responsible. So then it came out to, well, how do we get there? I came up with this idea, and I thought, well, how do I get there? Didn't like the idea of even setting it out as a press release, because I knew politically I'm going to be attacked from all sides. It's just the way it works. There are people that don't want any gun, period, into the schools.
Right.
We all know that whenever I try to do anything, I try to also put together a solution. Not just an idea, but a solution and how to get there. I knew my solution was going to get me in hot water again. But at the same time, if I did nothing, whose responsibility is it? Well, it's mine if I'm going to be in this position. So the idea that I came up with was the idea of part-time officers. It's not perfect. It's just the idea of having somebody there for a deterrent, for a connection between the kids. Hopefully you stop it before it ever starts, because they have a connection with those kids. The kids tell them these things are happening, or this may happen, and it gets stopped beforehand. And we all know financially we can't afford to do everything we want to do. If that was the case, we'd have a security guard or an officer or a fireman outside of every home. We have to make a determination of what we can do. So the idea was to, at least for our schools, get somebody there that is a trained law enforcement officer. May not be a resource officer with all the training or anything else, but get somebody there that will work at minimum as a deterrent, but also to be a connection between those kids and be there in case something does happen. The idea that I came up with was reaching out to our retired law enforcement. We have quite a few of them in our community. Mm-hmm. I talk to them all the time out there, and a lot of them were upset about how things were going as well. And they had made mention about what they would have done in that situation. And I started thinking, well, how do I help that along? So the idea was to put together a corps of resource officers for all the schools. 12 would be what's actually needed, but 5 part-time law enforcement officers could work 5 hours a day at these schools and be able to rotate between the elementary schools and actually at least give us some protection or put something in there rather than just pretend it's not happening. Mm-hmm. Right. One of the things people don't think about, you hear the term copycat.
Yes.
I think about it more along the lines of an old expression, movement breeds movement. It's not that these kids copycat, but because there's so much emotional things going on with it, so many conversations that are happening about it, there's so much movement. That's why some of these things are happening at the schools now. It's not these kids really want to be, but then the conversation starts. Then the ideas start going on. Movement breeds movement. Well, what happens if some of that movement goes past the line and something bad happens? Again, if it is to be, it's up to me. We're going to have to find a solution. Who's going to step out and at least throw one out?
Yeah, there were quite a few threats right after.
Yeah,
and
all
some like we didn't know what school they were threatening because they were just putting initials in there,
Yeah.
like SHS,
Yeah, you just
and
didn't
that
know.
ended up being in New Mexico or something.
Well, and this too may pass.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, what you had to worry about was the bomb threat because some kid didn't want to take his test that day.
Right.
Sure.
But that's not what we're talking about these days. And again, the chances are nothing will happen. But what if something does?
Yeah.
I read the paper. I've seen how mad and the comments that were made by the sheriff and stuff. But, and I had a community member that was mad at me. But I would rather apologize all day long to them for stepping out and trying something than apologize to one parent after something happened because I didn't.
Sure.
And having a presence on the school campus, like there were how many calls on this Nicholas Cruz to the police department. Even the kids at the schools are like, there was something wrong with them. Maybe having a retired officer, they could come and say, oh, this guy's a little sketchy.
Somebody you could talk
or
to.
this one, has
Feel comfortable that you
right,
can talk to them.
Right.
All right. How do we pay for this?
Well, initially, the beginning core would be 5. Okay. What's absolutely needed is 12. In order to get to the 12, you would have to have a full-scale understanding and agreement between all the school districts, the county, and the sheriff.
Sure.
But right now, in order to try and start something and put something together, one of the things that I put forward was a redirection of command staff or administrative finances. One of the chiefs that we have in this county are retiring. So it's not even talking about asking to lay anybody off. Let's not forget, one of them is retiring in April. It would be the idea of not filling that position. And, there's always going to be the argument of whether or not we need that position. I understand that. And we can have those arguments all day long. But the truth of the matter is, it is not normal for a county, especially of this size, to have 5 chiefs, 5 of them. Other counties, much larger, much bigger, don't have anything like that. An example would be, of course, Grace Harbor and some of our other surrounding counties only have 3. But look at even larger ones like Kitsap County, 260,000 people compared to our 60. Pierce County, 875,000 people compared to our 60. They have 3 chiefs, not 5. Even King County, with their 2.2 million people, they have 4 chiefs. So for myself, I know it's a sacred lamb not to touch or talk about doing this, but I would rather have us spend those funds on these officers rather than refill that position after he's retired.
So you get a sense that the 5 part-time officers with all the training and all that would fill the slot of one of the retirements for the chiefs in the command staff?
I have all the numbers. One of the things you should know is I don't just do these things half-heartedly. I know that's the accent. I go out, I always do my work. If you're going to accuse me of anything, I get too far into things. So I went to the human resources first.
That's good, though.
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you're talking to.
Right.
You'll hear differently. I went to human resources and looked at what the actual cost is. For example, the chief that's retiring, fully burdened, is about $145,000. A little over $145,000. Now, these law enforcement, retired law enforcement, they can only work so many hours. So please bear that in mind. And I went through to make sure what they can do and what they can't do. Certain officers would have a problem. The old left officers, they can't just do it. They take a risk. But others have different caps like 900 hours, 800 hours, and the like that they can still do and still maintain the retirement. The actual cost of one of those, with all the taxes, with all the L&I, with everything, comes out to about $30,000 a year for them to do it at a 0.5. Now, remember, that doesn't include medical because they wouldn't be eligible for medical.
Okay.
That does include some of the other things. So the idea of what we need, we're a little bit short. We would still have to come up with another $20,000 within the county. That's if they're even willing to consider this. You have to remember, for us at the county, it is our job and it is our responsibility, because in order to create a position, that has to be done through the county commission.
Right.
Okay, so you can't separate out the necessity of it. Because we have a hiring freeze. You can't just create positions. And besides that, if these were created, we want to make sure they're 0.5 or less positions. Now, remember, you can always share the position. You can hire 2.25 retired deputies. in order to make it happen. But it has to go through the commission before we could do that. And so that's where I was hoping to start. And I was hoping that the sheriff would consider these, not telling anybody what to do, but I'm trying to find an answer. And this is the answer I came up with.
Let's bring the sheriff into the conversation. He'll be on Monday, scheduled in, so we'll talk with him and I'll ask him some of these questions too. And he is a past educator and children as well. Have you had a chance to talk with him about this at all? How it may work if he's able to do this? And again, understanding the budgets in the county the way that we have them, it's his budget, right? In the sheriff's office budget, he's the one that kind of determines these things. So if you're able to just ask him to consider it, have you heard anything from him yet?
No. Well, anybody that follows anything knows that the sheriff doesn't talk to me. He flat out doesn't talk to me. Even if we have a meeting with the sheriff's department where it's one-on-one with myself, 5 to 7 officers will come in, so it's always like 5 to 1 for me, but he's not one of them. He just doesn't have those communications with me. I'm willing to talk to anybody. I don't have the animosities that others do. I don't have that luxury. I will smile and work with anybody that absolutely wants to get something done.
So how can we get this done? What are you suggesting? Either the public offer their support on either side of this, or how do we get this ball going?
Well, absolutely. They can offer their support. I need to talk to the commissioners a little bit further to see if they're willing to put those positions in to the budget. It would be up to the sheriff on whether or not he decides to follow through with this,
Sure.
because no matter how you look at it, this is his barbecue in his house. Okay. And, I read the comments about I shouldn't have an opinion, but you know what? Again, it's everybody's responsibility. And it is my job to have an opinion. It is, but more than that, it's my job to have the action. And I want to point out that some of the things that was written in the paper, it's not his budget. It is the people's money. It is always the people's money. I'm one of those people, but more than that, I'm also a commissioner supposed to watch it and try to see if I can have a greater effect on things. I want to point out that we last year added into the budget a boating officer / resource officer. During the summer, this person will be a boating officer. This person will be a resource officer during the school. I was one of the guys, if not the one commissioner that was fighting between them, and we finally were successful to get it put on, because I was in favor of this from the beginning for 2 reasons. One, we were paying all our boating people with overtime, and it made no sense.
Sure.
It made more sense to do the other. And, another comment that was in the paper about haven't seen my graduation certificate from the law enforcement agency. Okay, I admit I never pretended to be, but I want to point out that he has 2 chiefs that also have never graduated from the law enforcement academy. Out of those 5, only 3 of them were actual deputies and officers. So, let's open up our minds a little bit and just understand that even a broken watch is right twice a day. Give somebody an opportunity to see if they have answers. But I'm not looking to beat anybody. I just want to try and do something to put somebody in there now. And they don't have to be a full resource officer. If you have a retired person in there that's actually just walking around, talking to them, interacting with the kids, and is actually there, and you actually have a sheriff's deputy vehicle out in front, that alone is a deterrent, or might be an opportunity for them to talk and be there.
Sure.
And if anybody's ever been to schools and they had a resource officer, one of the best parts that I remember about watching is how many hugs that resource officer gets.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very close to some of the kids.
There was a lot of
kids,
hugs
so.
by
Yes.
the officers in parking
Florida,
when
yeah.
they came back. So
Definitely.
would you want this to be enacted before the end of this year, or
Yes.
for the start of the next school year?
If we
As
could
quickly
enact
as
it now,
possible?
why wouldn't we? That's, in actuality, right now is probably even more dangerous than it is next year. As we were talking about earlier, movement breeds movement.
Yes.
There's a lot of movement going on in these schools right now. Having something like that right now might make a difference.
Yeah, almost every day since
Yeah.
the shooting.
Well,
You
what
know, there's
happens
been
when one
something.
of them decide to cross the line from opinion to action?
Right.
That having somebody there, it makes sense.
Or the teacher that just shot a
Oh,
gun
that in
the
Atlanta,
school.
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Give
Well,
some-
and again, a resource officer would know what to do about it, but
Right.
even those retired law enforcement officers are pretty spectacular.
Yes.
They've been around a long time, and interesting enough, I've kind of found them to be as tough can be.
Oh yeah.
Well, the old timers,
Right.
I'll tell you what, you don't mess with them.
No.
There's something to be said about that, but also think about the mentorship, the leadership that they bring, the respect they get automatically when people talk to them.
Mason County Commissioner Randy Neatherlin on the air, proposing some options to add additional school safety here to the Mason County community. We'll have the sheriff's office in on Monday, so we'll ask them some additional follow-ups on this proposal and see if there's some opportunities to make this work. Thanks for coming on, Randy.
Yeah,
It's
thanks
good to
for
see
what
you.
you're
Don't
doing.
be a
That's
stranger.
awesome.
I appreciate you guys having me on. I just hope that when this is all over with, we don't fight with each other. This is actually just a call to bring us together and have the conversation,
I think
see if we can do it.
Can all agree on school safety, student safety, and then maybe this is a good jumping off point for further work together.
And if not, we have another idea. Let's do that, but let's do something.
Let's start
something,
talking about things.